All right, I'm Ryan from lostandreviews.com, and I am here with the director of The Hunter. First question, when you step in and you have to adapt Julia's book, which is fantastic, are you worried of how it's going to be portrayed on film?
A good question. The novel of The Hunter is a beautiful work of literature, and so much, there's a story there, but so much of it, the experience of reading that book is about the prose and the atmosphere and the tone, not necessarily like the dramatic narrative arc, So, and it's also, the book is very internal. Like, lots of it is a guy alone in the wilderness, and for an entire chapter we're inside his head, which as filmmakers, we don't have that luxury.
How do I do this?
Yeah, exactly. So really the challenge in adapting the book was finding ways to externalize the drama, to externalize the conflict, and to really kind of portray the character through his actions. I wanted to keep it very present tense. We didn't want to use flashback or voiceover. So that became an interesting discipline in the writing.
Right. And if you're looking for a character or an actor to express all of his emotion on his face, so you can't do much better than William Dafoe.
Yeah, well, interestingly, from very early drafts, I find it's really helpful to write, whether it's me writing or working with a co-writer, as was the case in this one. It's great to have a face in mind. And I have to say, from very early on, Willem's face, I often use when working on a scene.
Yeah, when you get that face in your mind, you can't really expect anybody else to be in the role.
It was a great relief and very rewarding when Willem first read the script and, pretty quickly agreed to come on board.
That's good.
After one meeting.
That's great.
Yeah.
So that says a lot for your adaptation of the book in the screenplay and stuff.
Yeah, it was like, part of it was about the script, but as Willem told me afterwards, a big part of it was us meeting and, really me having to describe to him my vision for, the film and also the making of the film, like particularly the relationship between he and I, which I really saw as a collaboration.
Yeah. A lot of the film, just the scenery is so beautiful, but also kind of like the filters that you guys used to, express different colors and mood and just blew me away. Did you always have that kind of in mind to be such a visual kind of film too?
Very much so. Look, and I worked with a great DP, Australian guy named Robert Humphreys. We plotted out before we started shooting, pretty much a color template that would chart the emotional journey of the character. There's two main kind of locations. There's inside a house, and there's everything outside a house. We also had there was a topographic journey, and there was also, I suppose, a journey across the climate. In that, we start off we end up in a very cold place.
Right.
And it's the landscape of Tasmania provides a lot of opportunity for shooting in different different kinds of landscapes, because it's all based on altitude. So you can, it's a small island, but you can find in one day of walking pretty much 4 completely different topographies just by getting higher. So you got this kind of amazing rainforest, like semi-tropical, not semi-tropical rainforest, but rainforest. And then you get into kind of like more gum forests, and then you get into like an alpine, quite a sparse alpine environment. So when we started looking for locations, we had kind of descriptions in the script. He goes to a certain kind of forest, but really it wasn't until we were down there that I was looking at locations that I could say, okay, this location, this sort of vegetation works emotionally for this certain part of the film. So it became like putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. So how long did it take you guys to scout that, to find all those perfect locations?
Look, in all honesty, I first went down to Tasmania looking at locations maybe 10 years before we shot the film.
That's awesome.
And I came back with lots of photos of amazing places that were useful when we were writing. But these were places that I had to go camping and like walk for a day to get into with a pack on the back.
Yeah.
And the reality was you can't get film crews in there. I mean, you're actually not allowed to land choppers on most of that vegetation in any of the protected areas. So when we met up with the guy who was going to be our location scout, you know, I'd have to say, okay, I want a place that looks like this, but we need to drive the trucks there. Unfortunately, he was a pretty experienced film guy, and he knew the needs of the crew. So he'd start coming back with photos saying, okay, look, you know, you can get the trucks within 100 meters of here, or you can, you know, so it kind of became about both the visuals, but also the accessibility.
For me, the film is so special. I've always been attracted to these kind of man versus wild films, and that's what I expected when I went into The Hunter. But really, it's man versus humanity. He's trying to decide whether he can, you know, live with himself and these decisions he's making, and whether he's going to become this hero. So, what part in the film did you feel like, is this going to be harder to portray, or how do we get, because it's all internal.
Yeah.
And how did you guys kind of come to that, you know, man versus humanity?
Look, that was always what we wanted to focus on in the script writing. But, you know, as an actor, say for Willem, it's not something you can play.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
So really what we had to talk about on a scene-by-scene basis was just the actions of each scene. And we had to, I mean, the script was pretty tight by the time we started shooting. Obviously, with each day's shooting, we would have to respond to the actual environment we were in and modify the actions, or, you know, the specific things that needed to happen. But we had to kind of put our faith in the fact that the script was strong and concentrate on the really the micro aspects of it. So today, this scene is about setting a trap.
Right.
You know, this next scene is about keeping out of the rain. But the cumulative effect of all of these actions is the wider story of a man kind of, you know, confronting humanity.
Yeah.
His own humanity and you know, kind of the morality of the humans around him. But there was never one individual scene where we could say, okay, in this scene, you're dealing with humanity.
Yeah, I mean, he faces, you know, kind of both sides, the extreme environmentalists and then the people that want to keep their jobs. And for me, that was the most touching part of the film and the way it was displayed. And the entire film runs on this emotion that just explodes at the end. Did you guys know that it was going to build and build and build like that until the final scene?
Look, you know, as the director, I had that plotted out. You know, I knew that that each scene had to convey a certain part of the you know, the bigger picture. You know, had to kind of build the puzzle. But Willem, like I mentioned before, he was never playing those beats. You know, he was only playing the kind of the beats of the individual scenes. But in much the same way as we plotted out the kind of the changing topographic and emotional journey, and used the landscapes and the color palettes to kind of reflect that, we knew that every scene was contributing in a certain way towards this kind of escalating pressure. And, you know, what's also interesting is just in the way that Willem's character had to navigate a path between the two sides of that, you know, that political debate, the loggers, the environmentalists. I mean, we as filmmakers had to do that as well. Yeah. We co-opted both sides to kind of help with the film. I mean, that when you see kind of hardcore activist greenies, you know, they're real. And when you see the loggers in the film, they're real.
Oh, wow.
You know, all the logging trucks and everything. I mean, we had logging guys stopped work for a day in order to help us film.
Oh, that's amazing.
But, you know, funnily enough, I mean, when we first went to look for the location that was kind of like a partially logged plantation forest, we turn up in our little kind of film crew minibus, and we got out and we're scouting around, and we see these very burly guys in day-glow vests and long beards looking at us, you know, with a lot of hostility. And they came up towards us and, you know, asked what we were doing, and we explained that we're a film crew, and they immediately lightened up and said, "Oh, okay, good. For a second, we thought you were greenies."
Oh man!
You know, and what it means if if you're a logger and a bunch of greenies turn up in a minibus and get out where you're working, it could mean that you're going to be shut down. You know, that they're going to have some reason for stopping your work. So there's a lot of kind of mutual suspicion and antipathy. We actually had a couple of scenes where we had loggers and greenies in the scene together, and you know, at first the logging guys didn't want to get in the transportation bus with the greenies. You know, it's like, we're not getting in the bus with those guys. But by the end of the night, and I'm thinking of a particular scene around a campfire, and then they were sitting there and they were talking and they were arguing their case.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of like a truce. I mean, I think that in the daytime they can kind of respect one another's opinions, but, you know, it does often become quite hostile and violent down there.
So you brought the two sides together with your film.
Man, I wish we'd been able to do it in a kind of global sense,
Right.
but that was maybe, you know, like one evening of kind of like, you know, amnesty. But look, it's the debate in Tasmania between particularly the greenies and the battle to protect old growth forests from future kind of logging development. It's a very hot topic, you know, and I think Tasmania is still it's a global front line in the battle to save the environment.
Yeah, and everybody wants to talk about Willem and how great he was. I mean, the performance is amazing. I think one of his best in years. But Sam Neill in this is just mind-blowing. That scene with him and Willem towards the end, and when they're at Sam's house, it's crazy.
You know, this is an interesting role for Sam because he normally plays quite sophisticated, you know, urbane characters.
Yeah.
And when I approached him with the script, you know, when we met, and he said, you know, Daniel, it's not an obvious role for me, really, is it? And I said, well, you know, no, that's why I think it's interesting. You know, he said, no, it's actually quite hard, which is why I think I should probably do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked a bit, and he told me that as a younger man, he'd grown up around sheep farms in New Zealand, so he knew a lot of these kind of rough rural types. And, you know, now he runs and does a lot of work on his vineyard in New Zealand. So I guess he's a man of the land. But it wasn't until a day before we shot his first scenes that I got to actually hear his accent and see his walk, you know, and he had this, he had this, I mean, it was great because, look, you know, maybe the subtleties might be lost on American viewers, but the differences between the New Zealand accent and the Australian accent are quite strong.
Right.
And, you know, Sam, he's obviously a man who can do accents because he's had a career in the US and he's played British characters. But, you know, this very particular kind of a Tasmanian rural accent, I wasn't sure how it was going to sound like. And when I heard it, it was great. It bowled me over. And, you know, he had a conversation with the wardrobe department and he said, you know, I don't think the character should wear anything newer than 25 years old. So it was a real transformation and it was just great to watch him work. And look, I had the great advantage that Sam Neill and Willem are old friends.
Oh, that's great.
They've done a couple of films together before. So, you know, it was very pleasant being on set with both of them.
So the chemistry was already there.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of mutual respect. And, you know, they also both like good food and fine wine. And Tasmania provides plenty of opportunities for that. Despite its very rugged appearance in the film, it's a very sophisticated tourist destination.
Just like on the other side of the places.
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah.
So, as a director, these two veteran actors, you've pushed them in this film. How do you go up to Willem Dafoe and say, I need this? Really, most of my work with Willem happened in pre-production, and that was I was still working on the script there, so I kind of invited his input, and he took ownership of the character, and that was great. I mean, because there was a mutual understanding of who the character was, where he needed to go, what he needed to do to get there. So really, I just had to hold on to the wider needs of the story, and let him run with that character. And when we had conversations on set, it was usually about the fact that the practical reality of the location we were shooting in didn't match what was in the script. How were we going to modify the scene to adapt? And there were moments where, you know, his instinct was to go one way, and I'd have to say, well, look, you know, for the story, I need this to come out as well. Can we find a way for them both to work together? And, you know, as long as he understood the needs of the story, he'd find ways for his character to come to that point. So, you know, the idea of me standing on set pushing these guys, you know, beyond their parameters was not kind of really how it played out. It really, you know, it was clear in the script what needed to happen. They're both very good actors. You know, I let them use their instincts
as to how they were going to get there.
Yeah, it's obvious though that the film pushes the actors, the material pushes the actors, and that's just great credit to you and what you've done.
Look, all credit to those guys for wanting to go there. I mean, look, hey, thanks. I'm happy to take some credit there as well. But we all pushed ourselves on that film. I mean, physically it was punishing. That's a tough landscape to shoot in.
It translates too. I mean, when Willem's up, in the cold searching for the tiger, you see kind of the pain on his face, which I'm sure was real.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a guy who doesn't like cold weather very much, and like while the rest of the film crew were in kind of padded film crew jackets and all the rest, he's in his very kind of slimline hunter wardrobe. He was suffering. He was suffering, and I mean, he said that that's his his preferred form of acting, where it's real.
So last question, coming down here to South by Southwest and bringing this film. What is it about this kind of festival that draws more attention to a film like The Hunter? I didn't know. I knew of this festival as a music festival, right?
And I'm really into music. And when our distributors said, "Hey, we want to premiere at South by Southwest," I thought, fantastic! I'll get to come here and hear some music. And I didn't really have a sense of what a cool town this was, what a great film audience comes to this festival, and what a kind of perfect slot, it is to kind of for the US launch of The Hunter. So I've got to thank the distributor, who is Magnolia, for knowing, for kind of having an instinct that the film would play well here. And it's good for us also because it ties in with our US release. Which starts in theatres on April 6th, but which is already playing on VOD, and apparently going great as well.
Yeah.
So look, it's all kind of it's great synchronicity that this festival is happening at this time, and yeah, what a cool festival it is.
Well, thank you for making the film, and thank you very much for doing the interview. I loved it tremendously.
Hey, thank you very much. Great to meet you.
And I hope everybody goes to see this. It's a powerful film.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right.